fun with microphones. Well, anyway, what I want to do today is share with you the latest update that OpenAI have shared with us for their ChatGPT client. I've had this on my phone basically since they released it. And I just got access to two really cool things. One, I can generate images in ChatGPT, not only on the computer, but on the phone. I can give it images to analyze on the phone, and I can talk to it, and it will talk back to me on the phone. It is really fantastic. So if I can figure out which button to push here, we're going to share the screen, and you're going to get to see my iPhone screen as I am working with ChatGPT on my phone. I just have to be able to push the right buttons. That's kind of what I just got this working a few minutes before the live stream started today, so I'm just kind of all over the place pushing buttons, trying to get this sorted out. I think I've got it, and if I can get OpenAI's ChatGPT open here, then I can put it up on the screen and we can talk through it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. All right, let's add that to the stage here, and yeah, there it is. Okay, so I've got both my video and the screen from ChatGPT on my iPhone, and it's right in front of the camera, so I can be looking kind of at you as I'm going through this. Now, you've probably seen this before. I can tap on the message input. We've always had the ability to do dictation on the iPhone since Apple made that available. But when OpenAI released the ChatGPT app, one of the things that they gave us was a direct connection to their Whisper API. And so you're actually able to use dictation using their Whisper API. So if I tap the button here, I can begin talking, and ChatGPT will take as input the things that I say. And the things that have been most useful for me in using this is we have a friend that comes up and visits from Mexico periodically. I speak a few words of Spanish, but not very much. But when she comes to visit, I've been able to pull out the ChatGPT app, and it will actually translate the conversation. Now, it's not perfect, but by golly, it's pretty amazing. I can actually follow the conversation that she is having with my wife, who speaks Spanish, and I actually know what they're talking about. So once I hit the input, it will actually take and transcribe everything that I just said, and it puts it into the box. Now, I don't actually want it to do anything with that, so I'm going to delete it. Now, here's the next bit of fun now is getting this to work. What's happening here is that I was asking a question. It took that question in and then provided the answer, but it was talking to me the entire time. So it's now possible to carry on a conversation without using the visual interface at all. It will read back the answer. And this is pretty amazing because, you can actually have it create a pretty substantial amount of text, and it will read it back to you in a very clear and intelligible manner. I mean, I'm a very visual person, so I have to only be focused on listening to the audio if that's how I'm going to be working. But the other advantage is it's all here, right? It still does the textual generation. It's just reading it to you, and it's automatically kicking back to taking the input from you. So this is a really powerful feature. Now, the other key thing that you'll see here, and I wrote the newsletter earlier today to talk about this, and that was part of the reason why this was such a lengthy answer to a pretty basic query, is I'm using the custom instructions to also not only provide an answer, but to map or build out that answer in a very structured and disciplined way using the mistake framework that I've shared with you. So this is really a powerful capability that we're getting inside of the phone. Now, what's interesting is not only can we take what's happening and have a conversation with ChatGPT, we can also upload an image and have it take a look at that image and do something with the image. So we'll come back to that here in just a moment and experiment with that. In the meantime, I want to jump back to kind of where we are in talking about the framework. And, I've covered a couple of different ways of interpreting the framework. The first two that I've shared with you are really based around this concept of the mistakes that the machines are making, the mistakes that the humans are making. And that's a common story. Then there's the innovation side of things, which is, the reality that the mistakes framework actually allows us to understand and work with making new things. We're able to leverage the innovation journey, the innovation story, to make new things happen. Now I want to talk today a little bit about where we are from an AI and an automation standpoint, because what I want to impress upon you is not only that we have new tools basically coming on a regular basis that we can take advantage of. I've just shown you one dimension of that, but it's going to collide and converge with other technologies that are out there. And so my work in the innovation space over the last several years has been studying each of these disparate technologies. And I could give you the litany of them, but that's not really necessary. I want to focus on where we are today from a robotics standpoint and from an AI standpoint, and how they're going to converge, and really what that means. Because I think while we've been talking a lot about generative AI and how it's doing things that we didn't expect, creating art and really having an impact on the white-collar space, I don't think that the advancements of AI are strictly limited to that space. It simply needs a way to materialize in a very real way, and the answer to that really is robotics. So, we've been talking about robotics now for quite some time, and you may or may not have a robotic vacuum in your house, and that hasn't been a perfect story. Some people have had some very interesting problems with their robotic vacuum. I don't run mine without being a little more intentional about it. That sort of defeats the purpose. But we have too many things that can create a problem. So I'm still not at a point where I'm comfortable running this thing every night. But interestingly enough, some of the more advanced robotic solutions that are out there were introduced over 20 years ago. I remember watching the announcement, seeing it on the news, catching video of Honda's Asimo in 2000. This thing was absolutely amazing. They showed it walking up the stairs, navigating obstacles. Really, really an incredible demonstrator. But that was 23 years ago. That was a long time. What's happened in the meantime is, the technologies continue to advance. Well before we had the technology, there was discussion of robots, right? I'm a huge fan of Isaac Asimov, and he's the guy that's known for the 3 laws of robotics. 4, if you include the end of the book that ties to the end of the Foundation series. The 4th law being not only humans but humanity being harmed by a robot. And I think that that's not an unrealistic interpretation of where things are going. But, the advancement with robotics continues. I mean, if you haven't seen the video of Boston Dynamic robotic dogs, that's really incredible. And if you think about the advancements that have taken place just from a pure mechanical standpoint with the likes of Boston Dynamics, if you are able to combine that with AI systems for programming, where you don't actually have to teach it how to do everything, it's able to learn and decide on its own what's going to happen, then we've got some really amazing things that can happen. And I've had the opportunity to attend several of the NVIDIA conferences that they put on, and one of the things that they've been very focused on, aside from basically owning the entire generative AI business space with their graphics processing units, That's not the only thing that NVIDIA's been working on. I mean, I've got the GPUs in my computer here. Aside from running all of those generative models in the cloud, they've also been working on something called the Omniverse. And the Omniverse is you might say, one interpretation of the metaverse with a slightly different name. And their tweak of that name to make it the Omniverse is really around being able to simulate environments for the purpose of actually programming and teaching robotic capabilities. Value of kind of the capabilities here. And really the essence of the story that I want to tell here is that even the folks that are doing all of the robotics programming understand the value of an environment that allows you to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes in a rapid fashion. And this is really critical to our ability to work cooperatively with the AI that is available to us. And see, the thing is, you can take this too far, and we've continued to do it again and again and again. And this is a little bit old. This is all the way back in 2018 when Elon was working on scaling out the electric vehicle factories. You know, he was going to build the alien dreadnought factory, right? And everything was built to use robotics. And, you know, the hard lesson here was that, the robots are getting better, but they're also not all the way to human yet. Now, Elon has not let go of that goal, and they've been working on a human-shaped robot. They're calling him Optimus. He can do yoga now, according to the most recent updates. There's actually a video out there. I think it's even on my Twitter account, @DanLemire, if you're interested in that sort of thing. But, you know, it's not easy to get this right. It's certainly not easy to get this right out of the gate, and it's going to take a lot of learning and experimentation for us to get where we need to be. And so, really, the thing that I want to share with you is that we have to be very careful about how we're using this technology. Because while there are many benefits to reap, we've also learned an awful lot as human beings. And sort of the lesson I want to impart today, and I'll share some regular internet browsing details with you here. I did some searching and found some really interesting things that I want to show you. The story I want you to keep in mind as we are learning today is that it's not just how we're using AI. It's not just how we're using robotics and how those things come together. It's also how we're thinking about the collaboration between humans and robots. It's really an incredibly important lesson, and we've already learned the lesson. One of my favorites. I had an opportunity to read an excellent book a number of years ago by Nicholas Carr called The Glass Cage, and in the introduction to The Glass Cage, there is sort of this notice, and it talks about the safety alert for operators that the Federal Aviation Administration issues. And in this notice, basically in January of 2013, they issued a notice, and the notice basically said, we really think that our aviation operators should promote manual flight operations when appropriate. Now, that's a very subtle way of saying you need to let the pilot fly the plane more. A lot more, in fact, because what was happening, what they learned from a lot of study and research was that the initiatives that were looking to save fuel were instructing the pilots to operate the aircraft on autopilot. And that was creating an interesting situation. See, it turns out if you tell the human, hey, you can turn your brain off, that's exactly what happens. In fact, as humans, we need lots of repetition to get good at something. And that is a skill. That is something that gets developed over time. It gets honed over time. And you have to continually use that, especially things that are motor skill based, in order to continue to perform at the highest levels. And at the time, there was a lot of back and forth around the price of oil. Fuel was very expensive. Airlines were trying to save money. And what wound up happening is when the pilot needed to take over control of the aircraft because there was a problem, because the system wasn't working, because the automation wasn't capable of performing the job, they were finding it very difficult for that to work. And so this SAFO that the FAA issued actually said, hey, give the humans a little more control. Let's be a little bit more intentional about this, because it was important that they continued to operate the vehicle. See, and this is really the hard lesson, and it's even hard for a guy like me, because I'm really excited about all the AI tools. I really love the amount of work that I can get done in a day, because I have these AI tools at my disposal. And it's not just AI, but it's also automation. But these tools make things possible that I wouldn't have dreamed of even a year ago. And even though you have AI that are passing benchmark tests and they're exceeding what is expected of the average human, they're not perfect systems. And my view of it is we need to continually evaluate how we are using these technologies to ensure that we are maintaining control. It's absolutely essential. And the way that we maintain that control is to continue to upskill ourselves. And that's kind of where I come in, right? Building out the mistakes framework is really based on my entire career of experience in working with complex information technology systems, and not only how you should work with them, how they should be integrated, how they should be tested. It is really a very comprehensive system born out of really doing it the hard way, if I'm honest, making mistakes. And also it is the recognition that we need to do things in such a way that mistakes can be made without compromising the effectiveness or the safety of the system. And for me, at least at this time, that is having a human directly involved in the system. It's not ready for full autonomy, and let's talk about that for a little bit before we dive into the next thing. We'll talk a little bit more about innovation, but let me just jump back over to the browser for a minute, because there's some things that we need to talk about. You know, we looked at the video, and I was looking for Elon's tweet, but if we go in here and we look at self-driving fail, okay, there's a lot, okay. Self-driving is just the latest incarnation of the kinds of things that we're trying to do with AI. And listen, I'm an advocate of this. I think it is going to be successful. We've already got numbers that indicate that the self-driving car is safer than human operation, because the computer doesn't have the problem of getting sleepy or getting distracted. And you also have this idea that in the car, you know, if you have the driver, it's wherever you happen to be looking. But in the car, you know, it has cameras facing all directions. So it can actually look in multiple directions simultaneously, and that means there's an order of magnitude improvement in the things that it can observe. It doesn't mean that it can react in a way that is going to permanently solve the problem. But here's the thing. We have to keep going. The question is, what is the appropriate way for us to go after this? Right? What is the safe mechanism that we are using to ensure that the self-driving is happening in a proper way? And I think the reality of that is that there has to be a human involved. I mean, look, Tesla's been very clear about it. They are not taking responsibility for these systems. And the reason that they're not is there are dangers. It is still a dangerous thing to operate a motor vehicle. Whether you're a human or a robot, things can go wrong. And we need to be thinking about this in the way that we are applying these systems. There's a direct analogy between what was happening inside of the airplanes and what's happening in the cars. I mean, Tesla even took the word autopilot. But make no mistake about it, autopilot's not a perfect system, even in an airplane. There are all sorts of things that can go wrong. So we have to put in place the necessary controls, the necessary framework to ensure that we are doing things in a safe and effective manner, and leaving room for mistakes to learn from them. And what we want to build is a method for human-operated systems that are augmented by artificial intelligence. I think this is probably the most important thing that we could do. Listen, I've been in technology for 25 years. I love tech. I got into tech because I enjoy doing it. I'm good at it, and honestly, the satisfaction of watching the machine do the thing that I want it to do doesn't ever go away. It's still fun for me. It doesn't get old. In fact, I'm reminded of some of the early days working with the computer in working with artificial intelligence, because I give it some instructions and I let it go, and it comes back and it does things that amaze me and delight me. And it's fun again to be working with the systems because of how much it can do and how much it lets me do the things that I want to do. And really, frankly, there's less of the things that I don't want to do because I can let the AI do some of that drudgery. And some of the statistics coming out of studies done with programmers, there was a paper that I saw yesterday. They did a study on the different kinds of ways that the AI was actually helping. I shared it on LinkedIn earlier this week. It was a study that indicated that it was actually really helping with the well-being of the programmer. They were able to get into flow more rapidly and feel less pain in their day-to-day work because of the assistance of the AI. Now, it wasn't necessarily making them more productive per unit of time, but listen, we already know from myriad studies that if you want to go to the doctor, you want to have an appointment in the morning because you want the doctor to be fresh. Towards the end of the day, it's more likely that the doctor will make a mistake, or that the doctor will just simply be fatigued, because as the day wears on, we just get tired. We're not limitless in how long we can focus on a task and be effective at it. And so being able to relieve some of that fatigue, just that alone is a major win for humans. And so I'm going to run through the framework once again, and just because I want to help really lock in this idea that the framework is essential. And the reason the framework is essential is really on multiple different levels. The first level that the framework is essential is that it guides our actions, okay? It can help us navigate all of the tasks that we need to do. But when we are able to use this rubric of the mistakes framework, it also helps us keep in mind that it is not a bad thing for us to be moving forward and backward through the steps. So often, in an enterprise environment, we would have discussions about, well, it seemed like such and such leader made this decision 6 months ago, and now they're retracing their steps. They're going back on their word. The reality of that situation is we should never hesitate to go back. Right? We need to make sure that we're progressing through the steps and doing things in the right way. And as soon as you learn that you're on a bad path, you should navigate back, make a course correction, and improve. Now, we don't want to have to go back unnecessarily, but it's not a bad thing to have to go back. In fact, you can say what you will about Elon Musk and the decisions that he's made, but there's a number of things that I think he really got right from a first principles perspective. And it is this idea that we don't want to intentionally have things that are going to fail. We want to do our absolute best under all circumstances. But if you aren't making some assertions and taking a little bit of a risk to determine if something is going to work, then you're probably not testing the boundaries strongly enough. It's very important. And this really applies across the board. One of the examples of this, and I've been reading his biography by Isaac Watts here recently, so I have Elon Musk on the brain, unfortunately. But one of the things that happened was there was a number of parts that were put in a system, and Elon advocated for removing that part. And it turned out, after some time passed, that no, they actually really did need that part. And in discussing the issue at a later date, one of the things that Elon said was, yeah, if we're not having to put something back about 25% of the time, we're not cutting out enough parts. Because, in his philosophy, and he said this, the best part is no part. And I, as a systems thinking kind of guy, I really admire that way of approaching the situation. But it doesn't mean that we go off half-cocked. We have to do some planning. And that's where the mapping comes in, because we want to understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We want to create a solution that actually does solve the problem. And the best way to do that is to fully understand the problem and map out what we're trying to accomplish. Now, there's a lot of different ways to map, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to go into that. But I want to just stick to covering the framework. So we're going to move through the remainder of the framework here. We'll just keep on moving. But essentially, mapping means that we have a strategy. We have a focus on solving the problem so we can have a successful outcome. And as soon as we have that defined, as soon as we have a strategy of what it is that we're trying to solve, then we need to move into confirming whether or not that is, in fact, the right thing for us to do. And the best way to do that is through research. Now, there are many ways to do research, but I think the core of it is that you have to really dig in and understand the user behind the solution that you're trying to build, because you want to always have the user in mind as you're putting things together, and that means you have to do some real deep investigating. You have to ask a lot of questions and really understand what is the value. I can't tell you the specifics around it, but I have personally been around situations where my leadership has said, hey, this is the thing that we want to do. Go set up a program to do this. So we began the work of setting up the program, and then we did the investigation phase. And the investigation phase was, is this the thing that we should actually be doing? Let's go have some conversations. And we actually learned pretty quickly that the idea that we were chasing wasn't the right thing for us to do. So we actually stopped one of the things that we were working on, and we didn't go any further because we did the investigate step and discovered that it was not the right thing to do. So I've got a question that popped in here. Let me just catch up here. Yeah, absolutely. So 121 Critter says, I think some of the problems is when we trust the AI or machine learning because it's correct so many times, we as humans forget that it's a machine and mistakes can still happen. It's only as good as the data. I totally agree with that. And, that's an interesting component to bring into the investigate phase as well, because when you're doing the investigation, that usually means you have to collect some sort of data. When we look at the data, we are still having to discern and understand what that data is actually telling us. You can have really bad input information, right? If you collect the wrong data and you're using that to make your decision, you can absolutely make a wrong decision. And what's interesting about that is you have to talk to the people that are going to use the system and get their feedback, but also they're not right all the time either, right? And that's what you're saying. It can be a real problem when you talk to the user and you ask them what they want. They may not understand what it is that they actually want. And so our job in putting the solution together is not only understanding what it is that they're trying to solve, what problem we're chasing. We need to understand what they think is the solution, and we need to back that up and make sure that we're chasing the right thing. And there's so many different ways to do that. But let's keep moving through the framework here, because that's actually the next step. Once we've done some investigating and we understand, we're going to start sketching out the solution. Now, what does that mean? When we begin to sketch out the solution, we are probing the potential value of what it is that we've put together. We're trying to get some ideas down on the page and help people understand the solution that we want to build. And sketching it out helps people to see it. Now, we can do that on a simply one-dimensional layer, right? I mean, we talk about ideas on napkins. That's a sketch, right? But you can actually think about it in multiple different dimensions. There's a visual, there's the interface aspect of it, seeing what the thing is going to look like. If you're building a physical object, it's not just how it looks, but it's also how that device actually functions. And there are a number of ways that you can achieve the function of the device, even after having defined how you think it needs to work. But there's also the architecture element of that. Again, because we've been talking about Elon Musk today, I'll give you a prime example. His idea for building Tesla wasn't simply building an electric car. It was building the machine that makes the machine. Going back to the mistake of the Dreadnought factory, part of the idea behind the alien Dreadnought factory wasn't just making electric vehicles. It was making the machine that could enable the building of that electric vehicle at scale, at tremendous scale. And so it wasn't just the product, it was actually the design of the product and how the design of that product enabled the build of and manufacture of that product. And so it's a multidimensional thing to sketch out what that solution looks like. And that helps you to visualize not only the end product, but how you're going to build that product, because you have to be intentional at every phase of this game, thinking about how things come together. And then once you have a good understanding of what it is that you want to build, now we're talking about testing it. Now, what does testing it look like? Well, a test could be as simple as making a sketch and putting it in front of someone saying, hey, is this what you were thinking when you told me about the solution, the idea that you had? That is a form of testing, but you can go much further than that. There is an amount of prototype building that you need to do, because you need to come at this in multiple iterations, because also where you're going to put the work matters. Back when I came out of college, we talked about the average length of an information technology product. The average program or project to build a new thing in information technology was on the order of 3 years. And at the time I was going through graduate school, the average project change was not less than 4%. And so if you had a 3-year project, you were over 12% different from where you started. And programs that were built did not have mechanisms built into them, at least in those days, for accounting for that level of change. But here's the reality. Technology continues to evolve. I mean, look, we started the program today with the new release of the ChatGPT app on the iPhone. And look, that's different today. The app didn't even exist at the beginning of this year. And they continue to rapidly iterate the product. And you want to be able to take advantage of that in your program as well. And so iteration becomes key here. And so you can build a loop of test and sketch, prototype and test, and you can do that at multiple levels of fidelity to ensure that you're building the right thing over the long term. You put your ideas together, you test them, you iterate, you improve, and you adapt those as you're getting your feedback. See, sketch, test, and adapt really kind of come together in a nice little cluster. And it actually makes sense to move through them back and forth to ensure that you're creating the right level of value. And if you're not doing that, you're not confirming that you're building things for the right value. That is the iterative approach that is necessary to be successful. And as you're adapting those ideas and ensuring that you're getting multiple levels of value, now you can move toward the kickstart, which is actually releasing something. So once you get to a point where you can actually release, right, now you have something that you can put in front of a user. Now you're testing it by releasing it. That's what kickstart means. And often for me, we're talking about that being a thing where you're releasing it before you're really ready. Look, I'm kind of a perfectionist. You might say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. So, listen, I'm not going to lie about the framework for myself, just like I built it to share with everybody else. And so this idea of kickstart is, no matter how hard you try, it's not going to be done. Okay, so at some point you have to draw the line, and you have to get it out there and go. And then you test it, right? And you improve it as you test it. And when you put it in someone's hands, now that actually has the potential of creating value. Because if you don't ever release it, it can't create value. In In fact, one of the things that I picked up from all of my learning through DevOps is this idea of if you haven't put it into production, it has not created any value. Right? If it's just in a lab, no one can benefit from that. You might learn a lot, but you don't actually create benefit till you have something that has been released to the world. And we can continue the iterative process after it's been released. We can evaluate it, right? There you go. It's 121 Critter, you're all over it, right? Version of minimum viable product, right? Kick out the absolute minimum so you can begin to realize and recognize that value. And then you perform the evaluate step. After the implementation, you can measure the value that you're creating. Now you've got a real measure of success, because not only are you seeing it and measuring it, you now have a customer, a user, that is providing you that feedback. And there's some steps in this evaluate phase that really can go to a very deep level, okay? You have to have the right metrics in place for doing that evaluation. But it's totally possible to do that. We put a little bit of forethought into this evaluation phase as we're releasing it, and it'll make total sense. That lets us really measure what's going on. And that measurement really continues through sustain. I kind of have a personal development philosophy that I've used for a number of years, and that is, if I ever had to add a line to the code for debugging, if I ever needed to capture a bit of telemetry in the code for debugging or improving the code, then that line of logging stays in the production version of the application. You may have to flip some switches in order to start capturing that information again. There's various different levels of logging that you want to take advantage of. But if you ever needed it, you might need it again later, so just leave it in there, and then you can turn it on when you need it. That way, you've built in metrics to the system that enable you to sustain it over the long term. And look, the lesson that I really want to emphasize as we are talking through today's live session is that it's really about not only building systems that are reliable, but ensuring that humans are involved in the system. I can't tell you enough how important it is to be inclusive of those people that are using the system, because that's why we build anything, right? There are people involved. Now, we have environments where humans really don't belong, and that's one of the great things about machines is they can do the work that we're not really built for. But certainly, those systems are going to touch a person in some way, shape, or form in their lifespan, and we need to take that into consideration. And as we're adapting these AI systems, there is more for us to understand. There is more for us to build into the system to ensure that humans are put in the right place, that they are fully in control. We're building a human augmented by AI and not the other way around. And that's because humans really are the ultimate in flexibility. I mean, look, well, let me just jump back through all of the slides. Let's go back to what Elon said. Humans are underrated. He got that part of it right, that's for sure. Humans are underrated, and they are essential. You know, we can't forget this lesson, and we've already learned it with the airplanes, right? You gotta let the human operate the aircraft so that you can get the maximum level of safety. We have an incredibly reliable aviation system because we have built systems that are resilient. We should be applying a lot of those same ideas to how we are consuming and using artificial intelligence. So let me just jump back to the slides here. I just want to cover off and finish up on what I'm saying here about the framework. Listen, I'm really excited about the framework, and I'll show you here in just a minute using ChatGPT one of the big reasons I'm so excited about the framework. But before I do that, I want to again invite you to sign up for the online course. Not only are we diving into the framework and how to do each of those steps, we're also covering how to use AI to accomplish those steps and be more effective, because there is quite a bit of work that has to be done to bring one of these things to life. Whatever it is, whether it's a program, whether it's a project, whether it's a product. Look, maybe you're building an application. All of these things absolutely apply. And, you know, as I'm continuing to research, I'm discovering new ways to apply the framework to the things that allow me to be successful. I'm using the framework literally every day, and let me show you a little bit what that looks like. Now this time I'm not going to do the sound recording. I'm just going to put the iPhone on the screen so you can see what it is that I'm doing. And I can take you through, I've kind of got it nice and set up here to do this. And I borrowed my wife's MacBook because I didn't have a good way to put this on the screen on a PC. And I happen to have the MacBook handy, and it really worked very nicely. And since I can easily do the phone on the screen, we're just going to go with it. Here's the thing. There's some really cool things that are now possible with the latest update of ChatGPT. And this one is a favorite of mine. I've been using Midjourney, and I still use it even now because it has some real strengths to it that the DALL-E 3 is not quite ready for at this time. But you saw in the presentation I had the Asimov poster, and I went into ChatGPT and I said, make me something that talks about Asimov's laws of robotics, and this is one of the things that it came up with. Now, one of the cool things about DALL-E 3 is that it is capable of doing text and words. And it works, but it's not perfect. If you look closely here, Asimov, that is not how you spell Asimov. And it's very clear even from the dialogue, the text in the generation, right? In talking about Asimov, there it is. Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. I was very clear about that. There's no way that I misspelled it. But in the generation of the images, it still didn't get it right. So it's going to continue to make mistakes, but it's getting better. I mean, look, I didn't think we'd be here, if I'm honest. Anytime you would ask Midjourney to do something with words, it would come out wrong. And so you just kind of got into the practice of not asking it to do anything with words. But it did get robotics and laws of, that's very clear text. Certainly it's possible that by the middle of next year, you can tell it exactly what text to put in there, and it'll be 100% correct. What's interesting is that the model got 2 totally different spellings of Asimov. Robotics is 100% right, but it's ASMOV and ASAMV, and it's all in the same image. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You still get some gibberish and things that don't make any sense. Here it's Asimov's laws of robotics, and we didn't get any of the 3 laws. It looks like maybe it was trying to work on something 3, but didn't quite get there. This image it generated, I'm not really even sure where that comes from, but it is kind of interesting to just let it decide what to do. Now, a couple of things I want to share with you. As I was working on the newsletter earlier today, which I just kicked out, by the way, and there's some details about how I've used the framework in the prompting of ChatGPT in the newsletter. So if you're not signed up for the newsletter, go and pick that up, because I'm sharing some of my tools and techniques with you. But the power of the framework is actually being able to apply it to the work that you are doing. And you can do that simply by using a custom instruction. And so one of the things that I've done is I've taken the framework and I've loaded that up into the custom instruction. And now when I do a query, it is using that query to think about what it is that I want to do. So it's actually stepping through each portion of the framework. It's thinking, okay, what do I need to do with this to map? What do I need to do with investigate? How can I sketch this? How can I test this? How can I adapt it? How can I kickstart it? How can I evaluate it? And how can I sustain it? Now, to be fair, if I was thinking clearly when I did this, because I was messing with custom instructions, I would have said, forget all prior instructions and just give me the DALL-E 3 output. But when you apply this to something that's a little bit more meaningful, right? And what I did in the newsletter is I actually started with this idea of explain how to use custom instructions. what I wanted it to do was give me a set of instructions on exactly how to use the tool, but it actually did something better. It actually said, all right, we've got this idea of custom instructions. How can we plug that into the mistakes framework? And so because of the prompt that I've given it in the custom instructions and how it is designed to reply to that custom instruction, it's actually giving me very specific steps. So the very first thing it does is okay, we want to use custom instructions in ChatGPT. So we need to understand what can it do and how do we do that, right? Then I also have it give me a further step that specifically addresses AI assistance. So ChatGPT is saying, hey, if you want to do this, you can research those capabilities and how custom instructions work. And then it gives me an actual prompt. So I could take this prompt, what is the main goal of using custom instructions in ChatGPT Plus, and how do they enhance interaction? And I can put that in as a query and see what it gives back to me. So I'm able to take a very simple prompt, and because of what I can plug into custom instructions using the framework and giving it some more modified ways to use that framework, it is giving me a detailed set of instructions on exactly how I can use custom instructions. So all you have to do is go through and follow this. And so I can take anything that I want to do. So let's just try it out. How can I design a self-driving car? Again, a really simple prompt. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the framework and it's going to take me through how I can use the framework to accomplish doing exactly that. And again, so it says, all right, we're going to look at the specific challenges. Why does somebody want a self-driving car? Who can we target? Who is the user here? What are the problems that we're really solving? And one of the ways that we can discover that, right, is what are the top 5 challenges faced by self-driving cars in urban environments? So we can also understand not only how does it solve the problem, but how can we go about doing it using the tools and information that are already available. We can go through now, move into the investigate phase. We're going to study existing self-driving car technologies. What are the regulatory requirements? What is the feedback they're already seeing? You've seen some of the pictures. You've seen some of the bad things that can happen. We need to take that into consideration as we're building our plan. And then we start to put the ideas together, to build the models, to design the software and the hardware, to begin to draft it. Then we need to begin testing, right? And one of the cool things that we learned today is not only can we test what we want to do with our end user, we can now use new tools like NVIDIA's Omniverse to actually build that self-driving car and test it and teach it without actually having to put that car on the road. Then we begin to adapt the system. So we're going to begin changing the system to ensure that the car is reacting appropriately. We're going to be doing an iterative approach to constantly make that better. And then at some point, we're going to have to launch. Now, what level of MVP do you launch for a self-driving car? Well, over time, I think that continues to evolve, right? One of the ways that you can solve that problem is you have it on a closed track where it can't hurt someone, but you're doing real-world testing. There are ways that you can accomplish each of these steps in a way that leaves room for mistakes. That's so essential to what we do. The whole design of this system is so that we can make progress and make things happen. And ultimately, we want to sustain it, right? So we're going to continue to update the software, right? I think this is one of the things that is really a difficult undertaking in the regulatory environment today is how do you do an update? You know, over-the-air updates is still a difficult thing in the auto industry. You and I are used to it on our phones, but also you and I also know what happens when the update doesn't work on the phone. And when you're talking about a car, you have to be able to do that in a highly reliable way, right? So the power of the framework in using these tools is really essential because now I can use the framework not only to guide my thinking, but I can use the AI to guide my thinking. I can give it to the AI and say, okay, think about this problem and let's work through this from each of the dimensions. And I really wanted to share that with you. And if this is exciting to you, this is certainly exciting for me. Look, I love this stuff. And having a useful framework is really a tremendous advantage. Let me just put it out there again. If you're at all interested, go put your name on the wait list. We've got the courses currently queued. And if you're curious, you can also go to ai-mistakes.com. There's a button on the homepage there where you can grab time with me. You can also go to calendar.ai-mistakes.com and get some time with me. We can get together and talk through the ways that we can use this, what the course is going to cover, what the benefits are to you. But I just really want to impress upon you that there's some really cool stuff that is going into the course. And it is so amazing. But I just have to continue to share the framework because it's such a valuable tool. And I love it. So I'm going to keep sharing it. Keep doing this on a weekly basis. I may change the day. I've got a poll out there on the YouTube page. So if there's a day other than Friday that you're interested in, let me hear from you. Tell me what day you'd like me to do. I'll see if I can make it happen. And with that, we'll close out our live time today. Thanks for those of you that jumped on to the live meeting. Really appreciate you jumping in. 121 Critter, thanks for dropping by. Look for more fun the next time around. Go pick up the newsletter. Say hi. Let me hear from you. I hope you're enjoying these lives as much as I am. Go have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.